We continue our sermon on 200 Hadith, sayings regarding what Prophet Muhammad taught for Muslim women by Muhammad S. Adly. We're not reading the book itself. Sometimes announcements are made, or proclamations are said about a situation to avoid the suspicion within others. Divorce during menstruation counts, but it should be something that is taken back. There's up to 3 divorces with the same person before it becomes final as such. And if the marriage is taken back, then a new dowry is to be given. And of course, the person who divorces a woman in that condition, they lose the first dowry. When a husband has desires, a wife should answer. Now, the answer may be no, but she should say why and have a good reason. Like nowadays, there's a lot of talk about, an unfaithful husband or an abusive husband or the rest of that stuff. And yeah, that's perfectly fine of a reason to withhold, forever at that point. The clothes with wars or saffron or anything like that are not to be worn on pilgrimage, and the shoes or socks are to be cut at the ankle. And during the pilgrimage, a woman doesn't cover her face or wear gloves. You can take the bad sign in what you see of a spouse, and what you see of a home or an animal. A work animal, not the sort of omen that you look at some pattern the birds fly and make a prediction or whatever sort of stuff that people used to do. But I mean, the waiting period after divorce is a month. Now, 1 menstrual cycle or more could have already gone by, and that would count as well. There are some narrations that people are going to bring up and say, well, what about the waiting period? It's like they were already separated as such for longer. When it comes to the spoils of war, you can't sell your portion until there's been a proper division of the portions. When it comes to women who are divorced, again, the waiting period, are women who are POWs or whatever, or that they've converted, or, whatever the case is. You wait until the waiting period is over, and if a woman's pregnant, that period continues until after she's given birth. Women can do their intended work during the waiting periods. People should limit the mourning periods, where they take breaks, to 3 days, except for a woman who is a widow who takes 4 months, lunar months, and 10 days. And by lunar months, I mean the 29 or 30-day ones that start with the sighting of the crescent moon. There is nothing wrong with a soft-spoken or emotional person leading the prayers. The trials for humanity will continue, either directly or indirectly, until the point where people approach God without sin. Now, one of these things is the hardship in this life and the hereafter that atones for some of the stuff, and therefore, some of the hardship on the way to the day of judgment leaves one's account without having to deal with those consequences. Now, there isn't this forget part when it comes to God. God always remembers. God effaces or pardons or whatever. God does not forget. And when we say his, he, him, in reference to God, we're not using gender here. Vil Kalasa will have their idols encircled by women with their rears. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that's going to be one of the signs of the day of judgment. And certainly all this fake altering of these celebrities, whether by surgery or photo editors and all that sort of stuff, to make their rear ends much bigger and more shapely and that sort of stuff, and exposing that, and people watching the moving. I don't know the proper name, and I don't want to be flagged for racially insensitive things, but I knew a guy who lived in multiple North African countries, and he used, the phrase for, that, bend over and shake sort of dance thing. And, all that sort of stuff's becoming more common. So maybe it's fulfilling things right now, which, you should probably look up, if you're going to watch a movie, at least look up to avoid some of that stuff going on. Even if you are a woman, women shouldn't be watching that behavior from other women either. The most entitled aspect of marriage is, of course, the things which become permissible in marriage. Now, that doesn't mean that the sort of things that are becoming more and more common that are not permissible or not liked behaviors, take place. And I mean, the dirty and the damaging certainly are that which is, considered degrading. You and your spouse can figure some of that out, because some of that, will vary per person. The money from soothsaying, from the use of a dog, well, certainly that animal breeding thing where the animal owner gets paid for the animal to have sex. That's, it's like you're pimping out your dog. And of course, pimping is not something that, of humans isn't considered something that the money's lawful. Either the pimp or the whore, whatever resources they get out of things, that's not lawful resources. Of course, other things that are unlawful is the increase. If you know that what you're getting from a bank or somebody who paid a loan or whatever is more in the dollars that you loan them, or, there's some sort of fee or something that equivalents to is equivalent to the percentage and all that, you certainly, that's not lawful money. And there's other types of usury too that's not lawful money. But this isn't per se a sermon about lawful and unlawful money, just a point here. If a single howler, pure, untouched maiden of paradise was to be known on earth, the light and scent and pleasantness would fill the space between the heavens and the earth. But you know who's better than that? Is a pious woman who makes her way to the paradise of the hereafter. Those who lie about inequality between spouses, and you know, you could say with siblings and stuff too, those are like people who have clothed themselves with garments of falsehood. Now, if there is inequality, then there's inequality, and you can mention that, but you should be careful about that stuff. Now, if there's some sort of business agreement between family, and again, people then can't say, oh, well, my parent did this, or I've heard from some people with opinions that, you know, if a parent doesn't want their child to have a proper room to stay in, or a proper whatever, that's their right as the parent. Even if, there is some luxury that parent has that could be given up to accomplish that. Let alone, even if there's not some business arrangement, there's no excuse for that stuff with parents. Islam is not one of those faiths that, the children and the wife can be mistreated if it's of the taste, or neglected because of the taste of the father or husband. Women may drag their clothes a little bit to make sure that they are always totally covered, but there should be a limitation in terms of the dragging. None of this, long trains of, like an extra garment back there and that sort of stuff that you hear of rich people on their carpets. And nowadays it's the thing to strip, but it used to be the thing for wealthy women to drag their clothes all over the place. And, that's not the point of making things a little longer. Men who seek the manners of women, and women who seek the manners of men, well, that's a reason for divorce right there. And you can turn them out of their homes if they're going to do that sort of stuff. Now, there may be laws about doing that with your kids before they're 18 or 16 or whatever the law is. So, you don't want to be punished by the law, but it's shame on the government for forcing that sort of stuff to occur in one's home if one doesn't want to support that. A person wanted a camel, and he was given a young she-camel. And he's like, what can I do with this? And it's like, well, she-camels are, camels are only born of female camels. So, and we're supposed to consider all species like that. Only a woman can be a mother. What was that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Junior? See, they were already trying to mess us up back then with that, right? You can visit the graves to be reminded of death, even if it's somebody that you cannot pray for because they died known as a disbeliever. People with means should divide of those means to take care of the starving people around them, particularly when they're facing a battle. Now, in one of these places, there's resistance. There's the besieged people, if you're going to translate that word. They're not actually terrorists or something like that. And, they've been facing this stuff more and more since the 1880s, particularly since the establishment of a National Socialist regime over them. And so, in a sense, they're always facing the battle, And for a long time, it's cost more to feed them than people in America. America is one of the most expensive places to do sacrifices and take care of the poor and stuff, but because of what they go through, you know. So, but, one of the things passed around amongst these people is that they have, I've met some of these people, and they know what to eat inside of a sidewalk walk, and what twig to dip in what liquid, and some interesting stuff. That obviously maybe it means that they survived when other people didn't. Widows may remarry if they want to. If one sees someone other than one's spouse and that stirs some desire, one should go to one's spouse maybe quicker. And if they're doing some sort of job that's not too pleasant of a job, like tanning leather or something like that, well, don't feel like you have to hold off because of that. Well, I mean, you don't, you need to protect resources. You don't just, it's not one of these, again, look to see if these scenes are in a movie, but people, push everything off of a desk and all that other stuff. When it comes to marriage proposals and looking for a spouse, find somebody with better character, aka better religion. Now, if someone has consummated marriage with someone's mother or daughter, well, then that can't be one of the wives that one is with. Now, there are some allowances when it comes to somebody accepts Islam and they are so married, or they're married to a certain number of people, as long as the individual marriage without any other conditions would still be lawful. Now, there's indication in this narration that there's also the impermissibility if there was sin of the sexual sort with the one woman or the other, but it has to amount to a sex act. Foster mothers and foster siblings are not allowed for marriage. And by foster, I mean the breastfeeding. You can call your spouse by the nickname of or Abu, and then, the oldest son's name. Unless, of course, the oldest son's name is Qasim, but you shouldn't name your first son Qasim. It's permissible for women to take part in the battles, whether that's as nurses, cooks, or the same as anybody else, except certain rules of modesty and the rest would apply. But as far as that sort of stuff, there's certain duty with the children and all that needs to be taken care of first before any of these endeavors. And honestly, very rarely is it even in self-defense sorts of situations where the women all have to go out and fight and all that too. Women can offer protection or treaties and whatnot. That's not limited to men to arrange that stuff. And also, women can be the ones to shelter their husbands or family members, aka like, they hold up the barrier or whatever for somebody to bathe or go to the bathroom. I know there will be preferences in terms of mere appearance or otherwise, and how a husband will want to spend time with his wives. But just like children, there's supposed to be a general equality of the time spent. But the allotments between wives, there can be agreements among them. Oh, you can take my turn this month too, or this week, or I have plenty. You can have my share this time around. That sort of stuff can be agreed between them. Martyrs are not just those who die because the disbelievers start wars or oppressions against the Muslimin, or battles or whatever. It's also those who die with faith, that go through a plague, a drowning, a crushing, or an internal illness. Of course, it's not the same thing as those who knowingly eat bad food and do impermissible things, and then they, die from that. So certainly if you eat halal and all that, and the lawful, and do what's wholesome too, then, then you're counted among the martyrs. And isn't there a narration that indicates fire as well? That if you die from fire or smoke? Now, if you stay at home and encourage the unlawful warfare, the wars to increase borders and wealth of people and that sort of stuff, then, of course, when that comes back around, you can't say, oh, I was an innocent victim and I died just, they killed me. No, you took part in the war too. One's responsible for one's legacy and what one can support. It's like people say, oh, governments are too powerful. It's like, it only takes like 1 out of every 5 people supporting what the government does for the government to get away with basically anything. So don't blame the government when the ruled have to agree enough. It's not just the rulers, but everybody's responsible for what they do. Women who do not remarry have more right over the children, and women who remarry, well, then the husband has more right. Now, when they become of age, but not legal age in America to, give up on supporting them as far as a right, that they should get a job and support themselves if they can. If they can't, then it's, again, a lifelong right upon the parents. But you know what I mean? Because certainly, even though the woman has more right, if there's not some criminal element or something involved, the ex-husband has the right to spend time with and train and teach the children. If it's needed for Islamic society, then migration and the just warfare are required. And by just warfare, we mean that almost every war ever that people could mention was not lawful. Certainly the 43 expeditions of Prophet Muhammad, and a lot of what was done in the following 3 generations by the Muslimin, in general. But, you should probably consider specific instances, because there were certainly things that didn't fit the anti-wars of expansion policy. Now, you obviously expand through wars, but you know what I mean. That was considered extra. Anything can come through extra, but not anything can come from extra. But, in Islam, we don't fight wars to extend the borders or make people into Muslimin. We hope people will be convinced by our society growing, but, we don't do slave raids. We don't force convert. We're not after other resources. The people who do this are cursed. I forget where the narration is. Not enough people share the for cursed people narration when it comes to war. Regardless of your allegiance to the state, there is still the allegiance to one's parents. Now, when one must have different roles in society, alliances with different people, you can, when necessary, make it seem like things are a little bit different. Certainly when one's parents may be holding one back in terms of religion, so therefore, I'm talking about the story of the boy who got trained in religion, and he didn't have the same religion as the rulers and the people of the pit. That story. But in general, be completely honest. It was just, Now, if you're married to somebody's aunt or niece, then you shouldn't marry them. Or same thing, the uncle or, well, women only have one spouse, but, the same thing, if there's been a marriage, then there shouldn't be another marriage. Temporary marriage was allowed in the year of Al-Qas, and then it was forbidden. Now there's chronic revelations about some things, and one of the things we need to understand is that some of the prophet's sayings abrogate some of the earlier ones, and the Quran abrogates much of that. So in any issue, turn to Al-Quran to find out the Islamic ruling, and nothing can overturn that, no matter how many. But, you read chapters and you find out that, like with some issues, it's like, okay, it was done in society, and it's a marriage, so, until Muhammad knew something being forbidden, he didn't want to make people forbidden. Like, he would be averse to some stuff. He'd never drunk an alcoholic beverage himself, but he didn't want to forbid it upon the people until God said, this is it, we don't do this stuff. The lawful and the unlawful can be distinguished when it comes to what's accompanying it and what the occasion is. Like singing for a wedding, if it's appropriate singing, obviously some of the music that people will play is not appropriate at all, even if you aren't getting people to dance on the dance floor and, do this to church or whatever this, The charity that is to be given before the holiday of breaking the fast, prayer and sermon of the morning of the first day of the 10th month of the sacred year. This is about 3 kilograms of fruit or grain. And of course, people are like, oh, well, no, don't give Wonder Bread or unhealthy food. Give just straight up fruit and grain. Now, some people are very particular that, the food that the prophet ate or mentioned is to be used, but dates and barley don't have to be the only thing mentioned. Some people wouldn't eat rice because there's no mention of the prophet talking about rice, or no mention of the prophet talking about the homes that were had in Persia or the Slavic countries or whatever. So people avoided that until they kind of eventually gave up on, well, just because the prophet didn't do it doesn't mean we can't follow his teachings in this new material culture. One of the points I keep making is that material and psychological culture, religion is completely adaptable to any of it. And no, that's not the same thing of these psychopaths that say, it's my philosophy. No, that's not what philosophy is. And honestly, when it comes to bouncing things off some of these philosophers, you can make the Islamic point with so many of them. But just quoting philosophers is not doing philosophy. Just saying what you personally feel inclined towards, that's not doing philosophy. When it comes to arranged marriage, it shouldn't just be the women arranging the marriage of the others women, and it shouldn't just be the arranging of a marriage for oneself. Now, when it comes to the marriage, one of the conditions is the wali, and that wali is someone who operates as a protector, and it's the protecting of the interest and the consent. Now, of course, one of the issues there is that the unlawful mixing tends to be more of the thing, like the women who wander off and try to get the attention of men, and that's asking for trouble. And by asking for trouble, I don't mean if somebody victimizes that the perpetrator is not guilty, and that there's any punishment for being a victim. It's just that's not appropriate behavior in itself. And you can say that wrongful behavior was done by people who were later or otherwise victimized. It doesn't mean they're responsible for that. Somebody jaywalks and they get beaten to death in the jail or something else. They're not at fault for what happened to them there. But they were responsible for breaking the law. And you can understand that they're responsible for breaking the law. But people, when they talk about religion, they try to say, well, the religion's blaming the victim. And it's like, oh, come on. Don't. Now, the people who are familiar in one area versus another shouldn't use that to take advantage. Same thing with people that come in and say, oh, now that I see somebody else wants this, if it's a Muslim and another Muslim, they shouldn't be trying to outbid each other. They find out somebody wants something, it's like, oh yeah, I want that too, or them too. And and marriages is one of those things too. And there's a lot of that, like the people, oh, well, someone else wants, so therefore I want. So that nips that in the bud. And also that means that it stops the jealousy issues in society and crimes and stuff that could be associated with that. If you say, okay, once there's been the attempt to buy or join the relationship or whatever, don't jump in and interfere once you see something started. Start with things, available. Now, if there's, okay, here's a group of suitors and we're going to pick one of them, so they all go to interview or that sort of thing, that's a different story. But once there's been an initial decision and there's whatever, wait for that to work itself out, whether it heads towards marriage or not. And you don't try to bring out the divorces in the others or spoil the deals of others in other ways either. Once puberty is reached, then full modesty is required. Before that, it could say that it could count on the behalf of the person without all the conditions being met. But once it's obliged upon one, because you're fully accountable, then, it's up to you to fulfill all its requisites. A wife that neglects a husband faces the curse for that. And again, I refer to abuse and mistreatment and all that other stuff. The wife has rights similar to the husband in terms of what the Quran has to say. And certainly, if a woman is mistreated, not just the husband has different taste in the media that he exposes himself to or something, but, if the wife is actually mistreated, in a severe way, then, obviously then she has an excuse. If she has health problems and are at that time of the month or whatever, then again, she has good reason and is not to be blamed. Sometimes the features of one parent will be more dominant in the children than those of the other parent, and that, just comes out through genetics. Of course, there is the raising of the child. So you try to raise them to be the best of both worlds. Now, women should not describe other women to the husband in a way that's not appropriate, and, vice versa. And one of the things about too is the spouse's, it's a betrayal. The spouse is telling other people, okay, people figure you have sex with your spouse at some point. How often and in what way you do it is not necessarily. And certainly some of these people's like, but what? Well, it's not hiring prostitutes or it's not fornication when it's marriage porn. And it's like, no, dude, marriage porn, you're violating the sanctity of the marriage, the modesty of both, and the detail that, it's possibly going worse than the other. It's not right either way, but there's people around that they treat that as, it's relationship promoting. No, it's just doing all these wrong things. If you consider women to be the weaker sex, now when it comes to certain physical and mental features, certainly there are what you'd call inferiorities, just like they have superiorities in certain mental and physical features to men. And, but where you consider the other to be weaker, then there's special rights and care that's required as part of that. The person leading a funeral will stand facing the head if it's a male and stand facing the waist if it's a female. If there is impotency problems, the spouses should work at it until at least the marriage is consummated. Now, if it's been consummated and there's been too long in between, then without a waiting period, they can just say it's been 4 months or a year or whatever it was, whatever length of time one considers it, and just say divorce, and already went through the waiting period. Now, if there's been a finalized divorce and the woman has to be with the other husband first and wishes to return because this who she married elsewhere would be impotent, again, they have to work at that until they consummate the marriage. Now, when a woman is menstruating, she should cover herself with the waist wrapper, aka she should cover what the her pelvis, and obviously the waist wrapper wouldn't that extend to the knees or whatever. And so what they can do in that position, with her covered like that, then that is permissible for them to do. And like with some stuff that is mentioned, there's citing on the air of caution, like certain positions that could result in unlawful acts. They're allowed, but there's extra care to be given. And it said that success will not come to people who have made a point of making a woman their ruler. Now, look at what's happened in a couple elections in America. They made a point of just having a woman. It's like, no, have the best person. If you're making it about gender or race, and then they came up with this phony race stuff, they had ancestry on both sides of the family, like genetic work. They had, the family tree, and, phrenology doesn't indicate, and this person claimed that there must be some minority blood in me somewhere, so I am that minority instead of the majority of her ancestry being for one place. But the point is that the people that just, let's make sure to have a woman ruler. It's like, yeah, these people are in failure. The whole society that's going along with that way of thinking is in failure. Just like I say, the people who say one race or another, it's like the best candidate for the political job. And then again, it's, you look at how the corporate world works. Just how many of the CEOs are one gender versus the other. There's nothing wrong with those differences. There can be complete justice in that system. Well, how there tends to be one more than the other or whatever, but I'm not saying the corporate system is just. No. There's going to come a time where the charity, you won't be able to give the charity if you have gold. And there'll be 40 women for every good man that wants, the security of marriage with them. Now, that could actually happen. And when it came to the thing mentioned the other time, again, the number of bad men, it's what each gender encourages in each other and what society kind of directs towards. And so why don't we just let women marry up the good guys and leave the bad guys alone if they want to? That's one of the reasons why I think they outlawed polygamy or made it almost impossible for your typical person to figure out, is because they, wanted to keep a system that forced the women into bad marriages, even though there were good people that, this guy has more wealth or more strength or whatever, let him have an extra wife. And like, no. So many of these songs are better than nothing. Can't find a better man. Better than nothing. Literally lyrics to songs. When it comes to extra fasting, a woman should ask her spouse. Now, a lot of spouses, this will be completely no problem. But certainly there is importance in regards to, curbing the desires of the husband and making his behavior in society better through that, or just the fact that religiously this is a good deed. No matter how much a person enjoys it, it's considered a good deed to get with one's spouse. It's not the Pauline thing. You avoid, if you are married, avoid it as much as possible and try to stay separate. And, and then if you aren't married, no, Islam is real to life like that. And honestly, if you put your consciousness into any lawful thing in life, there are those who do not complain when they just have some simple things, like some simple fruit and milk. Or, most people can't digest the milk proteins properly, or some people even have allergies of the lactose or something. But, just very simple provision. One should, if possible, learn to be satisfied with that sort of thing. One can marry somebody with the joy or vigor of life. And one can also marry for somebody to, be more of a help mate too. And that can be in regards to helping the family. Prophet Muhammad conveyed the peaceful, getting rumbling the tumbly there. I don't know if you could hear, but yeah, that was my stomach. He conveyed to Aisha, Hafsa, and some others about that he had visions and, met with Jibril in Arabic, and conveyed of their greetings. And certainly one spouse will sometimes see something that the other spouse doesn't. I knew a guy who said that his wife had seen flowers and stuff in prayer, and he never saw anything like that, but he believed her. As far as gifts, there should be permission to give from the property of a spouse. One should be careful of the women when there is moving things about and in travel. Men should avoid the scent with color, and women should avoid the color with scent. Charity, well, there's better places to put charity, but sometimes a rich person, a thief, someone who has unlawful sexual behavior, perhaps it will curb that behavior for them. So don't worry when the results of one's charity don't go in the direction that one intended, because it's out of your hands. But maybe it ended up doing something better than one thought. Ablution is not required just because you kissed your spouse, face to face. Silk and gold are limited to the women. Now, men can use gold in their machines and have the equivalent of a tie or smaller, but in general, these things are, for the women. The guy's not supposed to have a gold watch or a gold ring or a gold shawl or a silk shawl or, that sort of thing. The face and the hands after hitting puberty are the displayed parts of a woman, and also the feet, but she's supposed to be careful not to, have the legs or whatever uncovered. Now, she doesn't have to uncover these things unless she's like giving testimony. She has to give her fingerprint or vote, or she gives her testimony, so she shows her face. And these, I'm not sure if we're going to get into this, but the talk about, well, the woman, take a look at her. It's like, no, you don't get to see a leg or whatever. What you see is her face, and, they tell you if there's any unforeseen health things, if there's some sort of birth defect or birthmark in there, we shouldn't have annulled marriages because, there's something that they don't know about that's not to handle. And honestly, the people that, the nudity, and then they want to give people a test ride or whatever, and it's like, no, that actually doesn't help the situation, because they find out that people who have sex with each other before marriage are more likely to be divorced and have other problems with their marriage. If they live together, it further increases that. So again, these things that people claim are going to help, they don't. And a spouse is in the middle of cooking or something like that, no, they can stop if the spousal duties are called for. وَإِنِّي أُعِيذُهَا بِكَ وَذُرِّيَّتَهَا مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. So 336 has seek your protection for her and her offspring against Satan the outcast. I mean, because besides Mary, who else had a child who wasn't afflicted by the prick of Satan? But you can say supplications like this for the occasion, and much better than that thing that was going around online one of the things to get, well, I guess there's multiple things, so let's not bring it up because I don't want people to, well, the one thing is, some of the stuff's pretty funny. It's not, menial cruelness or whatever, but, anyways, there's supplications and stuff that you can say. Like a child's crying, it could totally stop it. Like unexpected, like, oh, the child comes out crying, you recite the verse, and some kids, like, go silent, Next to the false worship, one of the things that you absolutely do not want to get into, as because it's of the worst sins ever, is the killing of one's child because you don't want to share the resources. So let that be a lesson to anybody who wants to drive their family out because they're like, well, I have resources I don't want to share. It's like, okay, if that's your motivation, done, gone, give it up. But that's the number one reason for abortion, is that people don't want to share the resources with their kid. And it's like, there's an overabundance of resources in this world. There's plenty of people that get themselves in this situation. They decide to get married or whatever, and all of a sudden they have more wealth, than they ever had or something. It's not guaranteed, but, you never know what's going to happen, or you don't know what they're going to be able to do for themselves once things have been opened up that way. Now, a third sin to avoid, of course, is the adultery with someone that's the wife of someone that's taking it to a further step of bad. Now, if you happen to see something that you're not supposed to see, well, there's no blame on you for that. But if you keep looking, those extra looks, that is where the wrong comes. In general, for the men, the best deed they can do is to join in the fight for what's right. And women, the best struggle ends up being the accepted pilgrimage. And when we say just war on this channel, we don't mean, just what your country has decided or something like that. Just don't go fight because all religions basically say don't fight for your country. It's got to be better than just, the government. It's going to, because as I said, wealth, you don't fight for land. So if your country wants to be a bigger country, it's not allowable. If it's just because your country wants to force people to accept some sort of ideology or mythology, not acceptable. If they want, it's like these people talk about, oh, it's like, spreading. You don't spread democracy by not letting people rule according to how they want to rule. That's not democracy you're spreading. It's fascism, is that the word? It's important to worship with your spouse, worship extra with your spouse. If you wake up together in the middle of the night, pray extra. Make some remembrance. Women are something worth covering and protecting from temptation. I mean, that kind of goes for everyone, but it's said that from Iblis's throne, he receives mention of things that have been tempted towards, as I said. So, you don't want people to be temptation in themselves, and you don't want them to be tempted. So you kind of may want to protect them towards that. But the thing that is particularly pleasing and drawing near is that which causes issues between the family. So this war of the sexes, that's particularly pleasing to Iblis. Now, both genders actually accomplish more without it, but, they've tricked people with this empowerment thing. Look at how miserable people are all the time. When people do something good for you or offer a present or whatever, and it's not too good, just don't look down on it. If something's not too useful, like, animal hubs, there's almost no flesh that can be eaten off that, okay, well, if you can put it in the pot and if you can clean it off and put it in the pot and take a bite after a bunch of cooking, it's like it's still, useful. I don't know what you can do with hooves. You can buy pickled pig's feet and stuff. Well, I mean, it's not lawful to eat pig, but you know what I mean. You can. There's got to be some equivalent. I haven't seen anything else for sale as far as animal feet, but yeah, there's still some use for it. If it's something lawful, of course. Um, if you promise to play music or give a sacrifice or whatever, and it's not in an unlawful place for it, or before something unlawful, or there's not something wrong in itself, then you can fulfill it. And the woman who showed up and asked about that and played a tambourine, there's not much information about that, like where this was or whatever, but it wasn't at a masjid. That's all I know. Maybe he showed up to the house, and the prophet's wife was there, or something, and the woman played some music, or he was off in some other gathering or something. I'm not sure if he reads all his books on his channel, but there's at least 28 others, and he talks about some other issues. So Muhammad S. Adly, before my father retired, I would frequently watch his channel. I think he had something in the late afternoon and the evening, or one or the other. I guess maybe it depended on the time of, the time of year. But I thought he usually had a couple shows, and he would make his way through his books. He would talk about other hadith and stuff like that. So if you want to hear the narrations in the Arabic and his translation and commentary itself,